Hello, how are we doing out there? Uh, Welcome to my channel. This is for educational purposes. We generally review different theories of everything, things that you don't know about because they are little publicized, but people who've spent their whole life working on something, an all-encompassing theory, a theory of everything, a system of theory, and they never got any credit, and nobody ever paid attention to what they did, um, mainly because of certain kind of scientific censorship, the structure of scientific revolutions, and but I think that these are important findings and important foundations to build upon. In particular, today is the 234th video that we've done on the reciprocal system of theory. And this is a theory that was first originated by Dewey B. Larson back in the 20th century. And he died back in 1990, left behind many great books and articles, a lot of stuff that is pretty inaccessible, hard to pick it up. You got to read a few of Larson's books before you kind of see the patterns, see how he's being very consistent with his thinking, with his procedure. If you just look at it, a little bit of it, it kind of looks like, well, where's he getting this? He's just pulling this, this is just, he's just pulling this out, because it's convenient for him or it works for him. But when you look at enough of his work together, you can see that he's being very consistent and very precise with what he's doing. He was a true scientist. He really, really believed in the scientific method. He revered the scientific method. And so when people call him a quack or a charlatan, they're missing what he's all about. The basic idea behind the reciprocal system of theory is that we live in a universe of motion. And other people have determined that in the past, such as Thomas Hobbes and Rene Descartes, Arthur Eddington. But Larson distinguishes his theory by defining motion as the relationship between space and time. A relationship basically, implies a ratio or a fraction. And that is motion. Motion is a fraction where time or space is the numerator and space or time is the denominator. And all kinds of scientific phenomena, units, are expressible in exclusively space-time terms. Everything in the universe is either space or time, or a combination thereof in motion. And so that is where he gets the reciprocal system. Space and time are basically reciprocals of one another. If you have 3 over 1, the reciprocal of that is 1 over 3. You're just inverting the fraction. And so when you have motion, you invert the time and space components, and then you have, kind of the complementary motion. Okay, now, in addition to that, in Larson's, he came out with 2 fundamental postulates back in the 1950s, and then he took those postulates and said, well, if these are true, then what else is true? And so he derived an entire theoretical universe from his 2 postulates, really one postulate. The other one is kind of more self-evident, and the first one is the one that has the most meat in it. And then he basically compared his theoretical universe with what the scientists had come up with up to that point. I think that kind of got him into a little bit of trouble because he kind of, again, he believes in the scientific method, he believes in science, And so he thought that these scientists were actually coming up with valid things when they weren't always doing so. Sometimes their theories were biased because they, you know, kind of eliminated new theories. They were closed-minded to new ideas and new theories, and they preferred to stick with their pet theories, which is Larson was a victim of. But anyway, the basic, his first postulate, space and time both have multi-dimensions, what Larson calls coordinate space and coordinate time, XYZ coordinates, 3 or more dimensions of both space and time. And space and time also have their scalar motion aspects, a motion with no direction, only a magnitude. And that is, you can see that in the clock time. Time is always getting later and later and later, but in no particular direction. But there is also clock space. Space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart, but in no particular direction. And you can envision that using a balloon with a magic marker that you put dots on the balloon, you blow up the balloon, all the dots are moving away from each other. That is clock space. Everything is moving away from each other. And then space and time also are quantized, meaning that they have a minimum unit of space and a minimum unit of time. Less than 1 unit of space, and you don't have space. You only have time. Less than 1 unit of time, and you only have space because you don't have time. You have to have 1 unit to have any. And 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time is the speed of light. And so the speed of light in Larson's system is really like the midpoint of the universe, where Einstein says that the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe. That's because Einstein didn't know anything about this faster than the speed of light sector. Larson calls that the cosmic sector. And in the cosmic sector, the relationships are the inverse of what they are in the material sector. So you can extrapolate knowledge from the material sector to the cosmic sector simply by reversing the roles of space and time. So that is powerful tool to understand more about the cosmic sector, this sector of coordinate time and clock space. The material sector is coordinate space and clock time. We're familiar with that, but the coordinate time and the clock space we're not so familiar with. But when we begin to extrapolate things, then the picture becomes quite a bit more clear. Larson talks about a lot of that, especially in his book Beyond Space and Time, which we did many videos on that you can look up in the past. Okay, now what we are looking at today is the article from Dr. Bruce Perrett, who is one of the major revisers of Larson's work after Larson died. He worked out a few of the kinks in Larson's theory, and he also extended the theory into other fields. We're looking at his article that is called Geochronology. And this is also the first article in a series called Anthropology. This is, I believe, the 10th video that we've done on this article. And he wrote this under his pen name, Daniel Phoenix 3. He claims that Daniel was one of the computer programmers working on the Montauk project, which was the top secret time travel experiments done in the early 80s by our American government. And he's talking about arcs right now as moons, as moons being artificial. The moons of Earth and Mars in particular being artificial and really just being spaceships. Okay, so we'll go back half a paragraph here and then get started with uh, his analysis. The natural consequences of our theory indicate that the moons of the inner planets are not natural in the sense of evolving with the associated planets, but are actually arcs that were used by the SM Anunnaki Saurian men, like as in dinosaurian men, uh, as opposed to reptilian. Saurian men, Anunnaki, placed in orbit around Earth and Mars not very long ago. The Martian arcs of Phobos and Deimos are dead and are now just asteroids in decaying orbit. However, the Earth's arc, the Moon, is still running on impulse power with its inverse density gradient, hard shell, and gaseous core. Consider NASA's lunar mysteries in this light. 1. Scientists now tend to lean toward the third theory that the moon was captured by the Earth's gravitational field and locked into orbit ages ago. Opponents of the theory point to the immensely difficult celestial mechanics involved in such a capture. All of the theories are in doubt and none satisfactory. NASA scientist Dr. Robin Brett sums it up best. It seems much easier to explain the non-existence of the moon than its existence. 2. Incredibly, over 99% of the moon rocks brought back turned out upon analysis to be older than 90% of the oldest rocks that can be found on Earth. And Perret says the Anunnaki are not from this solar system, and their arcs would be much older than the planets. 3. The mystery of the age of the moon is even more perplexing when rocks taken from the Sea of Tranquility were young compared to the soil on which they rested. Meteoric aggregation, just like the crust of the planet over the mantle, is much younger. 4. During the Apollo moon missions, ascent stages of lunar modules, as well as the spent third stages of rockets, crashed on the hard surface of the moon. Each time, these caused the moon, according to NASA, to ring like a gong or bell. On one of the Apollo 12 flights, reverberations lasted from nearly an hour to as much as 4 hours. NASA is reluctant to suggest that the moon may actually be hollow, but can otherwise not explain this strange fact. And Perret says the inverse density gradient makes it hollow. And 5, astronauts found it extremely difficult to drill into the surface of these dark plain-like areas. Soil samples were loaded with rare metals and elements like titanium, zirconium, yttrium, and beryllium. This dumbfounded scientists because these elements require tremendous heat, approximately 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit, to melt and fuse with surrounding rock, as it had. And Perret says that a white dwarf fragment has an initial surface temperature of much warmer, much hotter than what is needed just to melt those elements. 6. The Soviets announced that pure iron particles brought back by remote-controlled lunar probe Zond 20 have not oxidized even after several years on Earth. And then 7, the upper 8 miles of the moon crust are surprisingly radioactive. He says starts at a high magnetic ionization and works down, creating many radioactive elements, though I do wonder how NASA got 8 miles of core samples from equipment in that tiny lunar module. Yeah, well, he should be wondering that more about all of this NASA stuff. Anyway, number 8. But after Apollo 15, NASA experts were stunned when a cloud of water vapor more than 100 square miles in size was detected on the moon's surface. The water vapor appears to have come from the moon's interior, according to NASA. And he says hollow gaseous interior leaking out. Number 9. Lunar explorations have revealed that much of the moon's surface is covered with a glassy glaze, which indicates that the moon's surface has been scorched by an unknown source of intense heat. And he says prior to being an arc, the lunar surface was a source of intense heat. Number 10, early lunar tests and studies indicated that the moon had little or no magnetic field. Then lunar rocks proved upon analysis to be strongly magnetized. That's intermediate speed motion. And then number 11, in 1968, tracking data of the lunar orbiters first indicated that massive concentrations existed under the surface of the circular maria. NASA even reported that the gravitational pull caused by them was so pronounced that the spacecraft passing overhead dipped slightly and accelerated when flitting by the circular lunar plains, thus revealing the existence of these hidden structures, whatever they were. Scientists have calculated that they are enormous concentrations of dense, heavy matter centered like a bullseye under the circular maria. And he says core flare from early expansion activity. Considering the moon as a white dwarf fragment that was converted to an arc for space travel readily explains all the observed anomalies within the context of the reciprocal system. And as a functional arc, the moon could easily arrive and depart Earth's orbit at the will of its operators. Okay, that ends that section. The next section is called New Jerusalem. The book of Revelation describes the city of God as New Jerusalem, giving a description of its size. Quote from Revelation 21, verse 16. And the city lieth foursquare, and the length is as large as the breadth, and he measured the city with the reed, 12,000 furlongs. The length and breadth and the height of it are equal. If this is an astronomical object, its Borg cube shape would have undoubtedly been covered in dust and debris over the centuries, turning it into a sphere and giving it the appearance of a celestial body. So let us do the math and see if we can find something matching its description. First, we have to determine the size of a furlong in modern measurement. The furlong has changed values a few times, but it was accepted at 600 feet, reminiscent of the sexagesimal system used by the Sumerians. But how big was a foot 2,000 years ago in Mesopotamia? Values on record range from 250 millimeters to 330 millimeters, with the accepted value being the British foot of 305 millimeters. The Bigfoots of Napoleon's era seem to be the exception to the rule of, and Mesopotamians are physically smaller people than Englanders. So let's split the range of difference and go with 278 millimeters as an estimate of the actual size of a biblical foot. Now to some calculations. The foot is 0.91 of the normal foot size, and you multiply that by 600 to get 547 feet per furlong. I'm not sure why he doesn't just go with the 660 feet that a furlong is nowadays, but perhaps it's because he's trying to fudge the numbers a little bit. But anyway, 547 feet per furlong, and then multiplying that by 12,000 over 5,280. I'm not quite remembering where the 12,000 comes from. Is that in Revelation? 12,000 furlongs. 12,000 furlongs divided by 5280 for feet per mile equals 1,243 miles on a side, not the accepted 1,500 miles, which is what I'm proposing. To find the circumscribed sphere that would account for the dust and rock of centuries, we multiply the side by the square root of 3, giving the sphere that is at least 253 miles in diameter. And it would be, more like 2,800 if it were that 1,500, that furlong, 1/8 of a mile furlong. Taking a quick look at objects in our solar system, we have a potential winner with the mean diameter of 2,159 miles, off by only 6 miles, also having some very unusual physical properties like being hollow, our moon. Could it be that the New Jerusalem is already here, parked in orbit around Earth, an arc? Interesting question. That is the end of that section. The next section is called Pre-Cro-Magnon Geochronology, and we're almost at the end of this article, so we will start up with that tomorrow, and probably finish this article and maybe go into part 2 of this article. And thanks for tuning in. Have a great day. Hope to see you tomorrow.